Welcome, everyone. My name is Mike Sheckman, and I'm the Regional Vice President for Robert Half in our British Columbia and Manitoba operations. I would like to start saying thank you for joining us on the call today from coast to coast. We're currently in week 10 since many of us have gone into isolation across the country. And although some regions have seen restrictions lift, many of us are still working from home through these unprecedented times. Unlike 2008, when the economy collapsed, COVID-19 transcends the economy and is affecting every part of our lives right across the globe as a crisis. So how do we continue to navigate through these times? There is no playbook. So in today's webinar, we're going to discuss working families, making it work for you. As a working parent, how can you make it work for all? For the last 2 months plus, working families have been contending with professional life and employment while juggling childcare, homeschooling, daily demands involving and keeping families safe, healthy, entertained, and on good terms. And that's a challenge, I'll tell you, from my terms anyways. All this within the confines of the small spaces that people are living in, it becomes a really challenging times. Never has the role of a parent or a caregiver, but also as an employee, been put under so much pressure. So over the next 45 minutes, I'm really happy to say the Robert Half's global leadership team and development will discuss what it means to be a working parent and how you can make it work. Join us to explore how balancing work and family and the integration that we're going to walk through, the personal change curve, letting go of perfection, tips for working families, and meeting the needs of your children. I'm super excited to partner up with two of the best in our business. Our facilitators today are Jeannie Omland and Carrie Petrachuk. Now, Jeannie is celebrating 13 years with Robert Half this year. Over her tenure, she's worked in multiple locations, both in the US and Canada, and she's presently the Director of Staff Development and Talent Acquisitions for both Canada and South America, overseeing Robert Half's training and development, as well as our internal hiring. When she's not at work, Jeannie enjoys the outdoors and activities with her family. Next, we have Carrie. Carrie is a mom of a 15-year-old son and 13-year-old daughter. She's been with Robert Half for 19 years, which is amazing. She's currently working as part of our development team over the last 5.5 years. Prior to that, Carrie was a key part of our leadership team in the GTA area. An interesting fact about Carrie is that she's been able to get a taste of travel when dance competitions took her to Europe. So over to you, Jeannie.
Thanks so much, Mike. I really appreciate that and really appreciate all of you finding the time to join us today. Today, we're going to discuss what it means to be a working family and making it work for everybody in these times. It's really important for us today to give you this chance to stop and reflect upon what indeed is working for everyone, and then explore further what is actually working, what's not going so well, and what things you can put in place to help. As Mike mentioned, Carrie and I have kids, and my kids are younger, so they're 8 and 3. And so we know firsthand the experiences and challenges of juggling childcare, homeschooling, the demands of professional life, and just generally the demands of keeping a home going. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is most likely either a parent or a caregiver and understands the boundaries between work and life have become ever less obvious and blurred. So with that, a lot of us will be or have been in survival mode, which has resulted in our well-being being pushed aside. So there are probably times when we've all felt overwhelmed, lost perspective, and probably even lost ourselves. We probably all know how easy it is to move from a healthy level of stress that we are used to experiencing in our normal hectic lives as working parents to distress very quickly. So the key there then is identifying what triggers us from this stress to distress for both ourselves and our families, and how to get out of it, which comes down to nurturing everyone's safety, belonging, and mattering. So the good news is that you've done an amazing job by carving out this time today and turning out to support your own well-being and that of your families. It's really important that you continue to take the time to invest in yourself. And a few additional thoughts before we continue is that I'd like to acknowledge that this is by no means perfect and we do not have all the answers. I mean, who does? But we do hope that by sharing some of our own personal experiences and research with you, it will provide you with some new and valuable tips for you as a working family. Carrie and I would be happy if our families can remember some fun times and times of hope during these times versus mom just yelling at them to be quiet because we're joining a large conference call or a webinar. We also understand that all families look and feel different, and we have tried to be as inclusive as we can be. But if we have overlooked a particular scenario, we do ask for forgiveness, as 45 minutes does not permit a lot of time, so we've had to be generic in some instances. That being said, everything we cover today, we do feel will work for you if you're a working family, be it a working parent looking after elderly parents or a carer, but the focus will be on working parents, as Carrie and I are both working moms and can speak to that with the most confidence. So I'll now turn to exploring career and family and the distinction between the two. As a parent and caregiver, but also as either an employee or employer and as a partner, you're now more than ever under pressure. Work and home have become the same space, and we're spending 24 hours a day in the same place with the same people. So all parts of our lives have been linked into this one big ball of stuff. And that can be really tough because now you're in a situation where you're managing parenting and your workload and the potential additional stress of homeschooling, all while ensuring everyone is fed, entertained, has enough to drink during the day, and then trying to end the day with everybody still talking to one another in a pleasant way. As we were putting together this webinar, we came across a British psychologist named Donald Winnicott, who writes about the need to strive not for perfection as a parent, but to identify what is good enough as a parent for both you and your children. And what he talks about is you have to come to terms with the fact that you will be imperfect as a parent. You're going to have failures. It's a part of life, and by understanding that, you will be in a better place and hopefully closer to happiness. Furthermore, what he talks about is that likely many of us on this call are recovering perfectionists. So moving towards the idea of good enough can be a really helpful one in trying to manage our own expectations, or indeed dialing down those expectations in these unprecedented times. So, with that in mind, what is good enough? What does making it work for everyone look like for you and your family now? Again, we understand that this is going to be different for everyone based on your circumstances. However, I would encourage you to focus on what has worked for you so far during this time and build upon that. Meaning, think about the good days. What things worked well on those days versus those tougher days? Because by focusing on the good rather than the not so good days, you will be hopefully able to see some opportunities or silver linings in this situation. A lot of work has been done by a gentleman named Sean Anker, and one of his focus areas focuses on reframing. His work on reframing is really based on how you react to your experiences. And if you look for good, you tend to get it. Whereas if you look for bad, you tend to get bad. So let's focus on the good, because it's important right now for everyone's well-being that we start there. Emotions are contagious. Happiness and positivity are contagious. So look for those silver linings, strengths that you're seeing in yourself and in your children, because they're there if you look hard enough and widen your lens. And for me, for instance, with my kids that I mentioned, I have a son who's 8 and a daughter who's 3. One of the things that I've seen over the past 10 weeks is the resilience in them. I cannot believe, from going from school full time with lots of activities, as well as my daughter being in daycare and preschool, their ability to really shift focus and be able to deal with just seeing mom and dad every day versus their friends. Also, their creativity has so much been nurtured during this time. To see them and what they're doing with respect to their schoolwork and their imaginative play has been amazing. For me personally, I was in a position where I was going to an airport and getting on a plane 3 weeks out of 4 weeks of a month. And now I'm home and I have the opportunity to witness these amazing things. But it's also given me the opportunity to be more organized. I was sharing with my colleagues that my office here at home actually doubles as a storage space for our household. And on March 16th, when I entered into my office, I was actually sitting amongst a sea of suitcases, and I found myself to be very disorganized and unfocused. So I took the opportunity to do some spring cleaning over the weekend, and it gave me the opportunity to clean out some things that I might not have had the opportunity to do, because when I was traveling, I really spent my weekends just spending time with my family and enjoying that time. So I'm sure many of you have had similar positive realizations or moments of joy. But I'm also sure that you've probably also seen some areas of sadness or frustration, and in some instances, guilt. And with respect to guilt, some of the things that I've heard as I've been talking to people and preparing for this webinar is that they're feeling guilty because they're at home working, or their children are there, maybe staring at them, asking them to go out and play, especially with the weather getting better, which would have been a different situation than when you were working at your office when your kids were at school or daycare. So turning back to Sean Anker's idea of reframing, I'd encourage you, if you're feeling that way, to reframe your perspective. And instead of feeling guilty, ask yourself, what are your children learning, or what will they remember during this time? Because they see you working, they will likely remember that you worked hard to protect your family's personal and financial safety. For instance, my 8-year-old son, Kason, often makes comments about how hard I work, which I never heard him say prior to starting to work from home, but he's witnessing it now firsthand. So it's about changing your mindset and perspective so you don't go from that healthy level of stress to distress. In addition, research has shown that it's much harder to see those silver linings if you were like how I was, disorganized, you're in an emotional state, impatient, or you're relying heavily on past experiences of what worked prior to the last 10 weeks. So taking time for yourself is key as a working parent. You're not immune to feeling overwhelmed. We're not superheroes. So please take that time for yourself. And that's going to look different for everyone. Some people might take time to exercise, to listen to a podcast, to watch a movie. But the time that you can take to help yourself decompress will help you be more patient, more rational, a better coworker, and a better parent. So please take in mind that reflection, because it's really important, as we know things are different and they're likely to be different for a while. Now I'm going to turn it over to Carrie to share some additional thoughts about how you and your children might be reacting to the present situation and how to cope. Carrie?
Thank you, Jeannie. The reality is COVID-19 has put a lot of our basic human needs in question. We all need and want to feel safe, and our children are no different. We want to know that we belong and that we are contributing in some way. And after the last 10 weeks of restrictions, many aspects of everyday life have been transformed. Our brains are neurologically hardwired when a threat proposes itself, like the pandemic. And we react in 3 very distinct ways. And those are fight, flight, and freeze. It's something that scientifically happens in our brains. And where we can control that is understanding what are the triggers that send us there. What are the telltale signs when we are in the moment? And also, what can we do to get ourselves out of it? It's important to learn this about yourself and those that you care for, whether that is people at home or your team members. The author Christine Comerford's work, her book is called Smart Tribes, and I would highly recommend it. It gives us some recommendations on how to do exactly this. So just remember though, this will look a little different for different people and children of different ages, but is a good gauge to what we mean by confusing and uncomfortable feelings. So for fight, these are individuals that, really run into the fire. For example, they have conflict and challenge and bad behavior, maybe even attention-seeking behavior. In ourselves, this could look like us being very frustrated or maybe snappy when we were asked for the 100th time that day for a snack, or what I get, I'm bored, with the eye roll. In flight, these are individuals that joke about the situation. They avoid you, use sarcasm. This is definitely my age group of kids. I mean, they very rarely wake up before noon. They come downstairs, get some food, go back upstairs. They need time alone to work through and understand their feelings, or do a TikTok or play video games. And again, as adults, this could show up by us needing alone time as well, pulling back from our loved ones, maybe stop trusting that they're going to get things done. If someone is in the freeze situation, these individuals do not ask questions and are 100% subservient and really desperate to not let you down. They become nervous and scared. Maybe they get physical symptoms such as a tummy ache or a headache. For us, it could present itself as wanting desperately for someone else to make a decision. Maybe have them decide what is for dinner. You kind of want to be a passenger and not a leader. The reality is, the human brain does not work well with ambiguity. It fatigues us in a way physically and emotionally than anything else we have probably ever experienced. What are the ways to nurture safety, mattering, and belonging? Now, this varies massively on the age and setup of your family. How you would do this for a 4-year-old versus a 13-year-old like I have would differ in delivery, but not necessarily that in content. For safety, talk with them about their worries, normalize their experiences where you can, and remind them constantly that they are safe emotionally, physically, financially. Remind them of the things that really haven't changed, and that is your love for them and things like that. For belonging, how happy you are to be isolated with them. You see how hard they're working at school. Working with them on a school project or home related project will show that as well. For mattering, highlighting all of their strengths and the new ones they have stumbled across during these times. Talk about how they help you make a difference to your day and how appreciated they are. I think about housework, and housework comes in here, and let's face it, it can't be ignored. But, I think ensuring that your children are helping wherever possible by getting them maybe involved in a fun way, because as we will see later, giving children a bit of responsibility is a really useful way to make them feel valued in this time and give them something to focus on. Ultimately, the most important thing you need to do is to ensure everyone's safety, mattering, and belonging is making time in your day for yourself, your children, your significant other. Whatever that is, maybe having lunch together, maybe having a snuggle or cuddle watching a movie together, maybe putting the music up loud and having a dance, or as in my house, watching and learning how to make new TikToks that they have learned that day. By connecting in ways that work for you and your family, you will build your family's resilience and confidence to work out what structure works for you now in this new world. So now we're going to talk about something called the personal change curve. Typically, we would use this as a leadership workshop, but I think it really relates well to working parents or people in a caring role with elderly parents or something similar. This comes from a resilience guide for people managers by two people, Cynthia Scott and Dennis Jaffe, How to Lead During the COVID-19 Crisis. And what they have put together here is they have studied people's reactions to change and discovered a pattern of 4 phases. Denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment, as described by Cynthia Scott and Dennis Jaffe's personal change curve. And moving through these phases is a normal and necessary part of reacting and adapting to change. Managers can play a big role in guiding employees through the change curve and with patience and empathy. So when we think about denial, it's pretty much what you would imagine. You just really can't believe that this is happening. This phase of denial often involves a feeling of shock and surprise, followed by attempts to deny or maybe minimize the potential impact of the crisis. Resistance is stage 2. After the reality sinks in, I call it the fat middle, we enter the second phase, resistance, where things seem to get worse. We may feel apprehensive and irritated. And I don't know about you on the call, but I was feeling like that a little bit too. Like, come on, when is this over with? Let's get back to normal. After a period of struggle and doubt, we shift to the third phase, exploration, where we typically become more positive and focused on the future. And at this point, we become confident that we can survive this crisis. The final phase is one of commitment and renewal with a sense of excitement for the future. So, what we would ask you on the call today, or think about, where are you on your personal change curve? It doesn't mean you're going to go necessarily 1, 2, 3, 4. It could mean you could go 1 to 3 and then maybe back 1 to 2, because we know it's not a straight road. But really think about the things that are pushing you through that personal change curve and what things are making you pause or getting stuck in one of those stages. As I think that will help you figure out where you are getting stuck in one of those change curves. We're now going to talk a little bit about focus and productivity. And focus and productivity often drop during times of turmoil. As a manager, are you equipped to support your employees as they move through the change curve? Now's a good time to refresh your resiliency and leadership skills so you can guide your team through crisis. They can also be effective to use with your family. Some tips to lead and parent through a crisis are: stay calm. I know it's not always easy, but that would be the first tip that I would share. Also, listen with empathy. Focus on short term directives rather than focusing on the long term. Each week, especially at the beginning for me, felt like a month, but now the weeks seem to be really going by fast. Be simple, clear, and prescriptive whenever possible, and provide a confident, hopeful view of the future. Things I would suggest here is to ask yourself, how do you want to remember this time as a working parent? I know I want to remember it as positive as possible. There have been some photographers that have been capturing moments, calling it like the front porch or front door pictures of families and where I live, which I think is fantastic. There have also, I've noticed, been various like Facebook posts, about the cost of gas, maybe what's missing from the grocery shelves, and how you have to line up to go to any essential industries wearing a mask and glove. I myself was one of those that posted it because I want it to come up in my memory a year later, so that I can remember really what happened. And then I ask you, what do you want your kids to learn during this time? How do you want your kids to remember this time 6 months from now? And then, what are the actions you can take now to align with this vision? Being able to plan more effectively is really going to help you to have those conversations and help your children, families, and teams to achieve that vision together. What do you have to let go of or worry less about to align with this vision? Is it your perfection? I know that this was one for me. I had to focus on those things that I could really influence. Being a role model has always been very important to me. How do I show up? I want my children to see I am hardworking and keeping them safe and financially safe and loyal. I believe, Mike, you wanted to share some experiences like this with the group today.
Thanks, Carrie. So many great points. And for the last 10 weeks, it's been incredibly important in the way we've shown up every day, both professionally and at home. For my kids and my wife, I wanted to always to remember that through crisis and adversity, there's always opportunities and silver linings. We often talk about gratitude and how thankful we are. For me, cutting down my commute by 90 minutes, having the ability to eat lunch together with my kids, and even going for scooter rides in the afternoon. So it's a tremendous opportunity where you're taking a negative situation and turning it into a positive, and things could be much worse. As parents, we continue to talk to our kids about empathy, about kindness, patience, active listening, and being present, which is so important for our kids to continue as they grow. But you can't teach that unless you are leading by example, and you have to be intentional and self-aware through your actions every single day. So those are a few things that have resonated and been focus points over the last 10 weeks. Over to you. Jeannie, I think you're taking it over.
That's right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. So We all have to remember that we're not perfect, and that's okay. Bad days will happen. Interruptions, they probably have happened and they will continue to happen. And I think one of the key things and questions to ask yourself around that is, what are you expecting from yourself in that bad day, in that moment of interruption? And we're not here necessarily asking you to describe the best version of yourself during that time, because these bad days and interruptions hopefully are not normal and are not typical situations. So be the best you can be at that time. Be the good enough version, the realistic version. There are also some things you can do to support yourself, and hopefully one or two of these things from the following micro list of self-care ideas might resonate with you. So ask yourself the following, or listen to some of the statements and write down your answers or thoughts. And based on those answers or thoughts, potentially create some visual cues that you can put up in your home office or wherever you might be working to remind you of them. So where might you need to dial down your expectations a little bit? Or on different days, do you potentially need to prioritize things differently? Because obviously, keeping on top of all of this at the same time will be very difficult, is impossible in my opinion, and very unrealistic. So that can really lead to that feeling of being overwhelmed. So for example, in helping to help keep the household running, Carrie was talking about keeping the house clean and household chores. We just don't have the time today to do every single chore every single day. So we've developed a cleaning schedule with respect to what I call more of the deep cleaning tasks. For instance, today is dusting day. So after this webinar, we'll be doing some family dusting. Other days we do vacuuming or scrubbing toilets. Some other ideas that we want to share with you are, please do not hang on to negative feelings. When you feel that negative feeling coming on, name it, take action on it, make a decision and move on. Do not carry it around with you for the remainder of the day. Finally, accept that you will get stuff wrong, and that's okay. We make mistakes, and it's great to learn from those mistakes. And you can use your own business critical thinking skills to assess the effectiveness of the solutions, and then lean into your competence and make adjustments and changes as needed. Considering this, I'll now turn to how knowing these things can help you to identify the right balance and boundaries between work and family while working from home. In order to create the right balance, there are some practical things that you can apply, and maybe some slight changes which will make things work easier for you and your family. They don't always have to be big changes. In fact, some of the smallest things that you do might make the biggest impact. So I'd ask you to think about, if you have parts of your day or there's certain times in the week where you're feeling dread or anxiety. For instance, knowing you might be going on a big conference call with your customers or your coworkers, and your children are in the background and there's a potential that they could be noisy or barge in at any moment. Alternatively, we'd also encourage you to think about the times that you're looking forward to. So potentially that's the end of the day work chat or a virtual happy hour or coffee that you might be having, where it's okay that your children are around. I know for me, I've actually gotten to know my colleagues better during this time because I've had the opportunity to meet their kids, albeit virtually. And in some cases, I've had the opportunity to meet pets as well. And it's so great because I've heard stories about children and pets for years, but now actually being able to see them face to face over the video screen, it's brought us closer together as a team. Some things that we might want to focus on though, when you're thinking about those more difficult times, those anxious times, are focus where you can make a few little changes. So think about, what is your daily routine, and ask yourself, what truly is required during the day? And what does everybody need? What is the thing that everybody must have that day? And having that conversation with your boss or your coworkers, your employees, partner, and children if they are old enough. You could also discuss what's worked well, focusing on the good, and then how might you carry what you did that day forward to the days in the future. Thinking about this structure and boundaries can be really useful when you're making these clear shifts. So the shift from family to work and then work back to family. There's lots of physical things you can do to help prioritize being the parent you want to be when you can be. And I know one of the things that I do is you all can see the door behind me to my office is shut. And my kids have grown to know over the past 10 weeks that when that door is completely shut, that's the time where they cannot be distracting me unless it is an emergency. And so that's something that we've done to help really separate between work and family. And I believe, Carrie, you're going to also share some additional tips as well. Carrie?
Great, thank you. So what I want to finish off with is some tips that we've researched. And the first thing that I will mention is to create and maintain a dedicated workspace. And I know that, we're at week 10, but it's really important to separate our working lives from our home lives. And that's especially true when working from home with kids. And because it creates that sense of mental separation from you as an adult. When we mix our working environments with the rest of the home, it's easier for us to feel as though we're always at work. So have a dedicated workspace. It will help prevent the blur between the two, particularly if that space has a door on it, as Jeannie had shared, with which to separate the working adult from distractions and help keep the focus on work and not the kids. This may not always be possible. I'm in my office now, but it is open. And so when we talk about, getting to know people and things like that, my dog is actually sitting right here at my feet, and I'm crossing my fingers that she does not bark. But sometimes a pair of noise canceling headphones can work just as well to create a mental space that is conducive to workflow. And it's not just for the adults to whom the separation matters. Having a clear home office where mom or dad will be working while they're at home is one way to establish a clear boundary for children. In cases caregiver and the child is not viable or appropriate, they separate work and play spaces within the same room can still help to create a distinction and space for the adult to work while the child plays. I say, let technology be your friend. The technology that has enabled so many to work from home can also feel intrusive, maybe adding pressure to be on all the time and responsive. Remember that video can always be turned off and the mute button can stay on. This can be a godsend on days when you haven't showered, are still in your PJs, and a kid is screaming in the background, or for me, my dog is barking. Some workers are getting creative with email signatures and auto replies to communicate availability to help set boundaries. So now set your work hours and stick to them. Kids need routine. And quite frankly, so do we, particularly if we're working at home with them. It's much more likely that the conference call in the morning will pass without interruption if they know that at lunchtime, mom and dad will be able to focus their attention solely on them. Maintaining business hours doesn't, though, necessarily mean 9 to 5. If there's space for it within the work from home arrangement, organize the day around the hours that are most conducive to productivity and flow can even help increase productivity. Having business hours will also help maintain that physical separation between work and home lives. Create a clear beginning and end to the workday, and provide set hours during which colleagues can get in touch and when they can expect a response. But maintain the kids' routine. As much as adults' work schedules will have to be flexible, it's important to try to maintain kids' routines. Regularity ensures their daily life reflects what is familiar to them and gives them anchors to tolerate new frustrations. It might seem silly, but maybe packing their backpack and putting their lunch in it, or giving them recess time like they had, or anything like that, will really help to be useful for them during a usual routine. It helps to make what's going on more visual and create a sense of agency. So set realistic expectations early. It's really important to set expectations early on for colleagues as well as for family. Being upfront on the challenges and or limitations being faced at home can help our teams to work with us to either work around or work more effectively with, and the distractions and interruptions that can come with working at home with kids. And not only that, teams with a high level of trust are higher performing than those that do not. Being open and honest with teammates creates a space for them to do and be the same. But also, children need to have clear expectation of their days too. Explaining to them in an age appropriate way that you need to focus on your work will help them know what is expected of them as well. Maybe begin the day with a family meeting. It is often not enough to explain just once to children what is expected of them. So beginning each day fresh is a great opportunity to do that. Explain the day's schedule and also foster a sense of togetherness. This conversation between the children and the caregivers can be structured in whatever way works for the individual family members. Maybe it's over a family breakfast, for example. Setting up the day by meeting together as a family can also provide a touch point for children in which they feel secure and supported. This is particularly important if working from home is new to the family unit and is shaking up set routines and providing a space for the kids to feel heard. Make a plan with your kids, even if they are little. If you can involve kids in creating solutions, they are more invested into living into them. And again, let go of perfection. As we have already discussed, now is not the time to try and maintain those high standards you had. You can accept that it's going to be different. And don't judge yourself too harshly when you get things wrong. Overarching all of this, ask yourself, what does success look like? I find sometimes drawing that and keeping that up on your wall can help to ease your mood. Maybe you have a vision board, and it really helps when you're having a particularly stressful time. Mike, I know that you wanted to share some examples of how you have incorporated some of these into your family.
Thanks, Carrie. And I'll be honest, the door that's shut, it doesn't stop my 3-year-old son from barging in, unfortunately. But, the first couple of weeks when COVID first hit, I spent much of my time focusing on the business and spending long days listening to my teams across the region and addressing business concerns. There's a lot of more questions than answers. Unintentionally, it came at the cost of how it made my wife and family feel. Personal concerns went on the back burner, and I knew that I had to make an intentional change in the way I acted. COVID continues to test my marriage, my wife's anxiety and mental health, my in-laws living in the basement, the 2 boys that are 5 years apart that require different learning curriculums. But what actually takes priority is a challenge. So for the first couple of weeks, my wife was screaming often. Hope she can't hear me right now, but that was the case. And I really had to take a pause and reflect and make the necessary changes that I can show up every day in my life the same way that I showed up at work. And that truly represents authenticity for me. So we made the decision to really map out what a day is going to look like and put daily structure in place. So for me, it was about taking on the responsibility of making breakfast every day for the kids, brushing their teeth, getting them dressed up for school, even though it was homeschooling. But it allowed them to have that space as well where they're going to study and get that curriculum done. And then I would go and leave for the day and go downstairs to this home office. And then at between 9:30 and 10, I would go back up to help get a snack ready, spend a few minutes with the kids, give my wife a break as well. And then again, go back to work. So it was able to kind of separate the two. At 12:30 or so, help with lunch, eat with the kids, and then a 3:30 snack as well. That structure really helped my kids understand that although daddy was home, it didn't mean that he was off work, which is certainly not easy for a 3-year-old to comprehend. I'll share with you guys a really quick story. Even this past Monday, I did a presentation for about 40 financial leaders in the Vancouver market. It was all about managing remote employees and talking about the re-entry of the workforce and what it may look like. And literally 90 minutes into the presentation, my little guy escaped from upstairs from under my wife's watch and decided to jump on the bed behind me, thinking it's a trampoline. And you know what? That is the norm. Everyone has something that's going on, whether it's a baby crying in the background, a toddler screaming, dogs barking, elderly dependents, spouses complaining. or people fully on the other spectrum being isolated fully on their own. But we have to let go of that perfection, as you alluded to. It's all about progress. It's all about getting used to what it is, and making sure that we're humane and kind through this process. So over to you, Jeannie.
Great. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Carrie, so much for sharing. So the last thing that we wanted to leave you with today is quite a big and important point regarding what kids truly need. And obviously, we all have our own opinions or perspectives about what our children need and how that looks. And in these times, unfortunately, it can feel like we aren't giving our kids what they need. However, a famous psychologist, Mia Kelmer-Pringle, wrote about the needs of children, and in all of her research, she actually discovered that children only need 4 things. So our hope is that by hearing this, it will make you feel reassured that you are making it work for your families right now, even if it doesn't feel like it at times. So the number one things kids need is love. They need those cuddles. They need that physical love, or the smile from across the room when you're working, or a virtual hug that I like to give them every now and then, because it helps them feel that they're safe, that they matter, and that they belong. And right alongside love, they need that feeling of security. They need that safe place where they can feel completely relaxed. Secondly, kids need responsibility. And of course, this is going to vary based on the ages of your children, but when you can, empower them. And for me, for my 3-year-old, what I've done for her is I have had each of my family members, but for her in particular, pick 2 days of the week where she picks what we're having for dinner. And she feels like she's contributing and so proud. And even though that means it's bacon and eggs for dinner twice a week, just the sense of accomplishment that she feels from contributing to our family has really gone a long way. And the third thing that children need is praise and recognition. And this is for children of all ages. And I think that it's a really useful one to remind us how praise can go such a long way for children. So if you're struggling and in a busy day, and that might be every day, put a reminder in your office calendar to take a second to speak to your teenager who might have just completed a virtual exam, to let them know how proud you are of them, that they're owning their own learning, and that they're becoming better with technology. If you have younger children, potentially take a look at the work that we're doing. My 8-year-old and I review his reading and math worksheets on a daily basis. And for even your tiny children, simply a thumbs up might really help let them know that they're doing a great job, and that means everything. And lastly, new experiences. New experiences are hugely important, and it might seem quite difficult at this time because holidays and vacations aren't easy. We can't travel with the restrictions that we have in place today, but new experiences can come in different forms. And I'm sure you all know there is so much available to us right now on the internet, maybe too much even, but there's fantastic things that people are doing. For instance, the clap for carers, so at 7 p.m., going out and banging on pots and pans to thank our essential workers for the work that they're doing. Basically, anything that allows your child to see the world in a different way is so important and will allow them to reflect on this time with positivity. So for me, one of the reasons why we wanted to share this with you today is because when I heard it, it actually made me feel like we're doing okay. And I imagine and hope you feel the same way, because you're all no doubt providing your children with what they need, and probably some days more than others. But if you can take just some of the things that we shared with you today, coupled with what you're already doing, and lean into that, I do believe that the silver linings will become more clear to see and feel, and you will all find a way to make it work for you and your families. So with that, I wanted to thank you so much for your time today, and I'll turn it over to our producer, Wendy.
Thank you so much for that great information shared. I would like to invite you all to submit any questions that you may have by clicking on the Q&A button. We may not have time to answer them on today's call, but rest assured we will get back to you. Some of the questions that have come up, in case you're interested, are referencing the books that we talked about today. So one of them was called Smart Tribes by Christine Comaford, and the other one is called The Needs of Children by Mia Kelmer-Pringle. So hopefully that's helpful for you all. And let's turn it back over to Mike to wrap us up.
Thank you again, Wendy, and thank you, Carrie and Jeannie, for your wonderful personal insights on this topic. And I want to thank everybody for joining us on this webinar today. I hope you and your loved ones stay safe and healthy through the weeks ahead. Thank you all for your time.